Morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Menachem Creditor. It's my honor to serve as scholar in residence and rabbi for UJA Federation of New York. We bring you Torah and music, blessing, and community every weekday. We have been doing so since March 18th, 2020. Today it is Monday, November 10th, 2025. That's more than 5.5 years of Torah every single day, coming to you from wherever we happen to be to wherever you are, so that we can learn Torah together with friends like Andrew, with whom I got to spend Shabbat this last week. Carolyn and Michelle, Michael and Carolyn, good morning. Hi, Linda. I hope that you are well. Andrew, what a blessing it was to spend Shabbat in your community. Friends, if I'm lucky, I'll get to spend Shabbat with you too. Reach out anytime. Anya and Barry, Cecile and Natalia, Boker Tov. Good to see all of you. Today is, I think, broadcast 1,200. Let's see if I can get it right. I'm actually looking down, and if Penny is here, she will correct me. 1,422. Emily, it's good to see you. Hi, Susie. Lydia and Arlene, Adrian, Boker Tov. Lydia, it was great to see you on Shabbat too. Debbie and Dave, Deborah and Dale. It's a lot of D's. Good to see all of you. Emily, Boker Tov. Penny, thank you. You have confirmed what I thought was true. Broadcast 1,422. Let's take a breath, sing a bracha. We'll learn some Torah. Ya la 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 la. Today I lie lie lie. Today I lie 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 lie. I la lie lie. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech haolam Asher Kiddushanu B'mitzvotav Tzivanu La'asok b'divrei Torah La'asok b'divrei Torah Hafoch ba v'hafoch ba La'asok b'divrei Torah. Today I lie 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 lie. Today I lie lie lie. Today I lie 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 lie. I lie lie lie. So good morning, everyone. It's good to see you. Linda, sending love to you as you've lost a dear classmate and friend. May her memory or his memory be blessed. May you be comforted. And Deborah, you're sharing that your mother is in the hospital. Shoshana Bat Rivka is on Army Shabbat list, davening for her, praying for her health right now. Judy, thank you for reminding us. There are a few very important things about today, even before we get started. Number one is yesterday, actually, and today, are the commemoration of Kristallnacht 87 years ago in Berlin and around Germany and reverberating throughout Europe and the world. This is the night of broken glass, where Jewish businesses and shops and synagogues and people were burned. It was part of the beginning, though not the exact beginning, of the great destruction of the Shoah. May everyone hold all of this witness deep within us. Today is 87 years since, and that's a fresh memory for the Jewish people. And of course, there are moments where we worry again. Certainly post October 7th, for us to have that kind of worry is natural. Important for us to remember what history has taught us, what we do in response to even the slightest signs of this kind of attitude, anti Semitism, pernicious in the streets. We have work ahead of us. May we be blessed to do so. In the same text, in the same comment where Judy reminded us of Kristallnacht, she also wrote Lion of Judah luncheon today. Let's remember that. At UJA and the Jewish Federations of North America, today is a day of celebrating women's leadership. The Lion of Judah is an incredible society within the Jewish philanthropic world where big commitments of soul, of means come together, and we elevate our values and propel them, we amplify them in the world. That is something to be very proud of. And as Rose is pointing out too, it is 1 year since the Amsterdam pogrom. For those who were paying attention, there were attacks on Israelis, Jews in Amsterdam 1 year ago today. So hold all of this with me, friends. I ask you to. And let's also hold our beloved You might know this name, Hadar Golden, Zichrono Livracha. Hadar Golden is someone who was held hostage, an Israeli soldier who was murdered and kidnapped 11 years ago, whose body was held hostage. Um, the Hostages and Missing Families Forum, which was founded after the massacres of October 7th, accepted, held, loved all those whose loved ones were still being held hostage. And so 11 years after Hadar was stolen from his home, Israel, his parents are able to finally bury him with kavod, with full dignity. May the memory of Lieutenant Hadar Golden be forever blessed. And we have beloveds to bring home still. We are not done. And so I ask you to hold all of the families whose loved ones were returned, especially hold those whose families have not yet been able to receive their loved ones for proper burial. May we have no need for such prayers and agmat nefesh and horror on the inside of our bodies. There is a lot to say about this week's Parsha, but let me add one more thing, a very sweet thing to add to today. Today is my father's birthday, and so I want to honor him as my teacher, as my beloved Abba, and share this Torah not only in his honor, but also to channel some of the learning that he has given me my whole life. So if you know Rabbi Gary S. Creditor, give him a call today. Say happy birthday. If you don't know him, find him on Facebook anyway. Tell him happy birthday. Make him smile. It's Parshat Chayei Sarah. This is a Torah portion where there's generational transitions that are happening. And these generational transitions obviously don't come without worry. There is worry in the air. Remember where we just were. Parshat Vayera, last week we read of the binding of Isaac, and this Parsha begins with the death of Sarah. We learn that Sarah wasn't present, at least not in the textual tradition, during the Akedah, during the binding. Her absence is a very, very powerful presence. This week is named for her. This Parsha, Chayei Sarah, is named for her. And one of the things that happens is the Parsha begins with her death. It ends with Avraham's death. And it is also really important to know that at the end of this week's Parsha, the vacuum that is created with her absence is not quite filled, but blessing returns to that space when Yitzchak finds his beloved and when she finds him, Rivka. We'll get to the love story of Isaac and Rebekah later this week in our learning. But I wanted to look at the process that emerges from the worrying. Here's how it goes. Abraham is worried, especially after the binding of Isaac. He probably feels even more frail in his mind, in his heart, in his body. He never again speaks to his son. It's a tremendous weight in the text, and it must have been so for him. So he worries that the covenant won't be fulfilled because his son Isaac is not wed. There is no next in line. So he sends his servant, who is not named in this parsha, but we believe it's Eliezer. So I'm just going to say Eliezer from now on. He sends Eliezer back to the old country, as it were, to Haran, to find a wife for Isaac. Now, you and I, of course, in our modern sensibility, hear this and say, that's not how it's done. But in that world, in those days, it wasn't unheard of. But what's really interesting about the way the story is told, and that's what I want to focus right now, the way the story is told. We hear it twice. It's a very intricate story. You might remember it. Eliezer says, on his way, trying to fulfill the mission that Abraham has given him, how will I ever know who the right person is? I wrote a children's story about this once called A Love That Will Knock You Off Your Camel. But that's a sweet version of a very strange journey. Eliezer prays to God, the God of Abraham, and says, If I am to find this woman, I need a sign. So let her offer to water the animals, the many camels that are part of my entourage, and offer me water too. When that happens, if that happens, I will know that she is the one. And then we hear the story which happens, which is Rebecca sees at the well this man and all of these camels, and she offers to water the animals and to offer water, to him as well, which means now we've heard the story twice. And then when he goes into the tent of Rebecca's family to make the case for her to be Isaac's betrothed, he tells the story again. And then when he comes back with Rebecca to Isaac, to Abraham's camp, he tells the story again. It's 4 times telling the story. And I want to be in this with you. Allison, it's so good to see you and Ed. Thank you for sharing a beautiful Shabbat and for being here today. Think about, friends, what it is to tell a story. You have one of those stories that when you're with friends or new people who you don't know yet, the story that you've told so often, you really know it well. If you're with someone, they know the story you're about to tell. So you're like, I'm going to tell them the story. And they know exactly what you mean. It's because this story has become so well rehearsed. But in rehearsing the stories that matter most, we often find ourselves, I think, telling it in certain ways. In our Parsha, we hear first the story about Eliezer and Rebekah from the omniscient narrator standpoint. The story is being told once upon a time. Then we hear it happening, so we're witness, which is different than having the story told. And then we hear that it is told through Eliezer's voice. And then we hear Eliezer telling it again. That's a lot of practice. It's a lot of storytelling. And to this is a beautiful book if you're looking for a new Torah commentary book, Eternal Questions. My friend Rabbi Josh Fagelson, has a beautiful comment on every single Torah portion. He quotes psychotherapist Estelle Frankel. So I'm going to quote Josh quoting Estelle. All verbal therapies are in fact narrative therapies. So before I move forward, narrative, the story. Therapy, healing. All verbal therapies are, in fact, narrative therapies, focused on altering the problematic stories people tell themselves. Hear that. All narrative stories. So, psychotherapy, Estelle Frankel writes, offers the patient a chance to edit or rewrite his story by framing it within a larger context or by making room for alternative storylines. Active listening with someone, paying attention to the story. I'm telling the story, and you've heard it before, but maybe with the kind of listening that you might offer, I'll hear myself telling the story, and maybe it will change. I have to imagine, we must imagine, that Eliezer, who's telling the story, and we've read it 4 times, he must change details based on how recollection influences history. Because memory is different than history. The story we tell is different than what happened. So what comes through in these stories? By telling his story to a sympathetic listener, namely the therapist, and think about this, if we're reading the text and Eliezer is telling the story, are we serving as the therapist by receiving the story? And Beth, as you said, so beautiful, the stories don't change, we do. By telling the story to a sympathetic listener, namely the therapist, the patient can begin to discover a new inner voice, that of a sympathetic narrator. A sympathetic narrator. When we tell the story, are we charitable? Are we sympathetic? This simple change, says Estelle Frankel, in voice, transforms the story. Events from the past are not just relived, but recast in a new light. The past is recontextualized by the compassionate awareness and insight therapist and patient bring to it in the present moment. This Rabbi Fagelson writes, and it's beautiful. We move toward an experience of revelation, a moment in which we can sense the divine moving in our lives and making possible an infinite array of stories. This is one of the Torah portions where storytelling is really prominent. And how you tell the story, especially if it's your own. As Beth wrote, we change even if history does not. The name of the book, Susie, is Eternal Questions. I cannot recommend this highly enough. It's a beautiful book. So I want to offer a quick thought when it comes to handling our own stories, especially on the 87th anniversary of Kristallnacht, or 2+ years after October 7th, or in a positive light, remembering Hadar Golden in all of his sweet youth, or celebrating my father's birthday today. How we tell the story matters, and hearing ourselves as storytellers, honoring our power and agency as narrators. Can we learn to be sympathetic listeners to our own story, forgiving ourselves for so much of what gets embedded in our stories because it's inevitable? We carry the bruises of all those stories because often the stories we tell are ones where we emerge, which means we got through something. I bless us to think about the way we tell our stories and not to suddenly shift the facts to make it nicer, but to be gentler on ourselves as characters of the story. What do we do when we read Torah? We sing it. We sing our story. Isn't that an interesting choice? Tell me about your past. Vayomer Adonai el Avram, lech lecha. Isn't that nice? Even the hard parts of the story have musical notes. And we bless, and we read, and we bless, and we learn, and we share, and we process. Maybe the whole goal here, in a strange way, is to be a good listener to the story of our ancestors, and in so doing, to maybe even offer healing to our own past. And if we do that, think about the way the story will emerge through us too. If the past can be healed, maybe we can see ourselves as healers as we remain characters in an ongoing story. It's a beautiful, beautiful weave. Beth, I'm going to I'm going to channel what you taught, quoting a story that Elie Wiesel tells about a Hasidic master who would one day become known as the Chozeh of Lublin, the seer of Lublin. It's a beautiful, beautiful story. So in the Chozeh of Lublin, the one day adult seer of Lublin, when he was a child, he used to run away from school. He ran away from Cheder. No one knew where he went. He always showed up at the end of the day, but his teachers began to be worried. Oh, Beth, you know exactly where I'm going. Yes. One day, his mother, who had learned of his exploits, became concerned and decided to follow her son into the forest where he seemed to go. So she dropped him off at school, and then she followed where he went. And of course, as Beth said, he went to the forest, and there she saw him go to the forest, where he seemed to stand still, and the forest seemed to stand still with him. And at the end of that standing still, it was already the end of the school day. He would go back to school, and there his mother picked him up. And she said, "My beautiful child, my son, we're getting a little bit worried. You haven't been at school. So I followed you today, and I know where you went. Why did you go to the forest?" And this little boy, who would one day grow up to be a visionary, said, "I'm searching for God." And his mother, in a loving way, laughed and said, "My child, of course God is in the forest, but you know God is in school too. God is the same here as God is the same there." And this little boy looked at his mother and said, "You're right, mother. God is the same here, and God is the same there." but I'm not. In that short story, shared by Elie Wiesel, known now by many, is the model of, first of all, childhood curiosity and how it can lead in the healthiest of ways to experiencing the divine. Who's to say that Eliezer didn't have a direct channel to God the first time the story was told, and then still moved forward through time, telling the story again and again, leading to the ultimate beginning of the Torah, which is a love story between Yitzchak and Rivka. We could use more love stories, friends. Maybe if we bring love into our stories, our living stories, and even love into our voice as we tell the stories, maybe we can learn to be sympathetic listeners to ourselves, and in so doing, influence the way the story will touch someone else. So let's take a breath, send our hearts to the east, and sing. Kolon maleva penima nefesh Yehudi homia ulefate mizrach kadima ayin letzion tzofia Olo avda tikvatenu, hatikva bat shnot alpayim, liot am chofshi be'artzenu, Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim, liot am chofshi Be'artzenu, Eretz Zion v'Yerushalayim. Am Yisrael Chai. See you tomorrow, my friends.